The Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor at the State Department works to protect human rights and champion American values across the globe. Scott Busby is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor at the State Department. Scott, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Mimi. Happy to be here.
You've been a leading defender of human rights for nearly 3 decades. What drew you to a career in that field?
Well, it started in college, Mimi. When I entered college, apartheid in South Africa was still a big issue. And that, to me, resonated of our own civil rights challenges here in the U.S. So I initially got involved in trying to figure out how best the U.S. might be able to influence the situation in South Africa. And soon after that, I spent some time in Guatemala on a study abroad program. And when I was in Guatemala, I personally observed human rights abuses. And from there on out, I was compelled to work on those issues, to try to do what I could to address them.
You created something called the Khashoggi ban, which is named after the slain Washington Post columnist and Saudi dissident. What's that ban and how does it work?
That ban is a policy decided on by the Secretary of State that basically says persons who are complicit in reaching outside their borders, who repress dissidents, journalists, others who criticize the host government, are subject to a visa ban in the United States. So the hope was to get at not only those in Saudi Arabia who may have been complicit in the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, but others around the world in governments that reach outside their borders to repress people who criticize their governments.
Is your office also identifying Russians accused of human rights abuses against Ukrainians?
Yes, we are. And indeed, a couple of weeks ago, we were part of an effort to impose visa bans on over 2,500 different Russians who are involved in either the aggressive acts in Ukraine or in repression inside Russia.
What progress has the State Department made in addressing China's human rights abuses?
Well, we sought to address those abuses in a variety of different ways. We have imposed visa restrictions on some Chinese individuals complicit in human rights abuses. Indeed, individuals involved in the very acts of transnational repression that I just described. We've also imposed economic sanctions on both Chinese officials and Chinese entities complicit in human rights abuses in China. And we've also contributed to efforts to stop the flow of U.S. goods and services to entities inside China that may be complicit in human rights abuses.
You've also called attention to human rights abuses in North Korea. What's the most concerning aspect of that situation now?
Well, there are so many human rights abuses in North Korea, it's hard to highlight one, but I would say the most egregious one are the people who remain in prison camps. There are several 100,000 who are still in those prison camps. They are subject to forced labor, torture, all sorts of deprivations of their rights, and that probably is the primary issue we're focused on, but there are a wide array of human rights abuses there that are a concern to us.
There's also political prisoners there and in many places around the world. So in terms of securing the release of those prisoners, what influence is the State Department able to bring to bear on foreign governments?
Well, we have a variety of tools. Obviously, we engage in diplomacy, talking to those governments about our concerns and raising those concerns in multilateral fora, such as the UN. But we also have a variety of carrots and sticks. Carrots in the form of assistance, meetings that other government officials may want to have with our senior officials, things of that nature. And then we have sticks like visa restrictions, economic sanctions, and our ability to withhold assistance from those governments.
Scott, you were involved in imposing visa restrictions against human rights abusers of LGBTQ+ individuals in Uganda after that nation passed legislation criminalizing same-sex relationships. How do you identify the people involved?
Well, it's tricky business. We do rely on our embassies in those countries because they are close to the ground there and they may be aware of individuals complicit in abuses. We do also look to NGOs, international and national, who may have identified individuals complicit in human rights abuses.
Authoritarianism is on the rise globally. I don't have to tell you that. And there's so many activists that are in political prisons. There's refugees that are fleeing war and oppression. How do you stay optimistic?
Oh, that's a good question, Mimi. Mostly by continuing our work with the people on the ground fighting these good fights. It's always inspiring to see individuals in civil society, whether they're NGO activists, journalists, political activists, who are fighting for democracy and respect for human rights in their countries. And when you talk to people doing that sort of work in the face of horrific circumstances, it really is inspiring and makes you realize that human beings want to be free. Human beings want to live in democracy.
You know, I wonder, finally, Scott, if there's an issue or a case that you've worked on or focused on that's really resonated with you.
Well, there are a number of individual cases. When I was in law school, I worked on the case of a young Guatemalan boy, really, who had fled Guatemala because he was about to be conscripted into the military, and I helped to get him asylum, and that case still resonates with me. More recently, I helped to get asylum for the son of a very well-known Chinese dissident who arrived here in the United States, was detained for a period of time. So it's those sorts of individual cases that often are most satisfying to work on.
All right. Well, Scott, we certainly appreciate your work, and I'm sure so many people around the world appreciate it as well. Thanks for being on the program.
Thanks for having me, Mimi.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any future Government Matters interviews.